Shaquille O'Neal pulled his SUV off the road in Gary, Indiana at 6:05 in the morning. He just wanted a simple breakfast before heading to Chicago. The retired NBA star had no idea he was about to walk into something he never saw coming. At the cash register of an old diner, he recognized her. Clara, a 65-year-old woman. 30 years ago, she had stepped in front of a crowd of reporters to protect him. Now that same woman was being pushed to the edge. A giant fast food chain had opened right across the street. She was losing more than $3,000 every month. Shaq found out, but Clara turned down his help. So how does this man, one of the most famous in the world, save her life's work without touching the pride of an old working woman? And how does one small act turn the whole thing around? The night before, at a fundraiser event for LSU down in Baton Rouge, Shaq had sat through 45 straight minutes of interviews. 3 sports journalists, 2 podcasters, a group of marketing students who wanted photos to post on Instagram. They asked the same questions he had answered 1,000 times. They smiled smiles he already knew were not real. They slapped him on the back like old friends, but their eyes kept drifting toward the cameras to find the best angle. By midnight, when the last person finally walked out, Shaq sat alone in the large conference room of the Magnolia Suites Hotel. He stared down at the carpet. It was yellow, the edges were fraying, and something heavy settled across both his shoulders. Not the kind of tired that comes from a long day. The kind of tired that comes from being looked at, but never actually seen. He decided to drive. Alone. At 4:47 in the morning. No assistant. No bodyguard. Just a gray Chevy Suburban he had rented from the airport, a black coffee going cold in the cup holder, and U.S. Route 30 stretching north into thick November fog. He had on the same old gray hoodie he always wore when he did not want anyone to recognize him. Faded blue jeans, with a worn spot on the left knee. A pair of white Air Force Ones in size 23 resting on the gas pedal. They looked like 2 small boats down there. He called it his invisibility outfit. It did not always work perfectly, but it worked well enough in the right places. Gary, Indiana appeared through the windshield at 6:03 in the morning. He had not planned to come here. The city just showed up the way old cities do, slowly, like a familiar face you do not place until you have already passed it by. Low industrial buildings, dark and quiet. Old smokestacks that no longer put out smoke, but still stood there like markers from another time. The smell of rust and cold damp air mixed together in a way Shaq could not quite put into words but would never forget. It reminded him of Newark. Not exactly, but close enough to make him slow down. That is why he stopped at Steel City Diner. Not because the sign was anything special, not because the place looked inviting. The fluorescent light inside came through the foggy front window, pale yellow and warm, the way light in old diners always is, like that light had been switched on 30 years ago, and nobody had ever touched it since. The sign was hand-painted on pine wood. 2 plastic flower pots sat out front, knocked sideways by the wind. And through the moisture on the glass, he could see the silhouette of a woman bent low over the front counter, wiping it down in the gray dark of early morning. Shaq stopped the car, cut the engine, sat still for 3 full seconds. Then he ducked his head, pushed the door open, and stepped out into the cold morning air of Gary, Indiana. The diner door was old aluminum, with a rubber grip bar that had worn away at both ends. Shaq had to tilt his head down about 6 inches to clear the frame when he stepped through, a reflex he had built over 30 years of moving, through a world designed for people nearly a foot shorter than him. He angled his right shoulder inward, so he would not clip the doorframe. A small bell above the door rang out. Inside, the air smelled like butter melting in a cast-iron pan and coffee that had been brewing since well before sunrise. Old pine wood, a damp cloth, 6 square tables covered in red and white checkered cloth. Only one was occupied, a man in a blue work cap, bent forward reading a folded newspaper. The ceiling fan turned overhead in a slow, steady rhythm, like breathing. Behind the counter, a small television played the morning news at a volume, so low it was almost nothing. And at the cash register, the woman who had been wiping stopped. She looked up. The 2 of them stood still for 3 seconds. That moment stayed with Shaq long after. Not because it lasted long, But because it was long enough for him to recognize a face he thought he had lost somewhere in memory. The lines at the corners of her eyes. Silver-framed glasses sitting low on her nose. Salt and pepper hair pinned back at the neck, with a brown plastic clip. Hands holding a blue cloth, large hands, rough and thick the way hands get, after a lifetime of real work. Beatrice Holloway. That was her real name. But in Gary, Indiana, the people who had known her for 30 years still called her Clara. It was the name she had gone by in her younger days, when she waitressed at a place called Riverside on Michigan Avenue, before she opened her own spot. The name Clara had stayed, with her the way old cities hold on to the names of factories that shut down long ago. Back in 1994, she was not a restaurant owner. She worked in the employee cafeteria at the United States Steel plant on Broadway, serving lunch to morning and afternoon shift workers for 11 straight years. On March 14th of that year, a pack of reporters drove down from Chicago to follow Shaquille O'Neal. He was 22 years old and in his second NBA season, with the Orlando Magic, visiting a volunteer basketball camp for kids from the area. The reporters spread through the hallway of the community center, pushing and shouting, pointing cameras and microphones at every direction he moved. Beatrice was standing near the storage room door at the time, a plastic tray of lunch portions balanced in both hands for the volunteers. She saw the young player pressed into a corner of the hallway. His jaw was tight. He was scanning for a way out. She did not think it through. She set the tray down, walked out into the middle of the crowd, and spread both arms wide. She spoke in the same voice she used when a long line of hungry, worn-out workers needed to move. Step back. Give the man some air. The reporters paused, long enough for Shaq to slip out through a side door. He looked back at her once. She never knew if he had held on to her face, but she remembered his eyes. The eyes of a young man being treated like a product rather than a person. Now, 31 years later, that same woman stood behind the counter of Steel City Diner in Gary, Indiana, at 6:05 in the morning. And they were looking at each other the way two people look when they are both remembering the same dream at the same time. Shaq spoke first. His voice was rough from bad gas station coffee and a night without real sleep. He said, "I was hoping to get some breakfast if you are not too busy." Beatrice set her cloth down on the counter, slow and careful, like she needed one extra second to put everything back in its right place inside her head. Then she pointed to the table by the window. It was the only one where a man his size could sit, without having to torque his knees sideways. "Sit there," she said. "Menu is on the table." He sat. The wooden chair groaned under 325 pounds. He looked down at the laminated menu, the print faded in spots from too many years of being wiped clean. One item had a red ballpoint circle drawn around it, with a handwritten note beside it. How special. Same recipe for 30 years. The steelworker meatball plate. He ordered it. She brought coffee out first, poured it into a thick white ceramic mug with a blue ring at the rim. This was not hotel coffee. It was dense and bitter the way real coffee should be. Shaq took one sip and set the mug down. He looked around the room while he waited. Black and white photographs and frames on the walls, steel mills from the 60s and 70s, rows of workers standing in front of the gates, faces proud and straight. An old U.S. steel calendar tacked near the kitchen entrance, yellowed but hanging level. A glass cabinet with stacked metal utensils, everything lined up and clean. Everything in this place was old, but old the way things get when someone takes care of them, not old because they were left alone. Then he saw it, sitting on the shelf below the register on the left side, next to a roll of receipt paper and a box of pens. A white document with a thick red header at the top. He could not read the whole thing from where he sat, but he could make out the bold type at the top of the page, overdue notice, and below that, a number that started with 3,000 something. He did not ask about it. He set the coffee mug down and looked out the window. That was when he saw Glory Burgers. A big yellow sign burning bright across the street like a brushstroke that landed in the wrong painting. Floor-to-ceiling windows throwing back white and blue LED light. A fresh blacktop parking lot stretched out 3 times wider than the gravel patch in front of Steel City Diner. An electronic sign cycling red letters. Grand opening week. All combos $4.99. It was barely past 5 in the morning, and that lot already had 3 cars in it. By 8 o'clock, there would be 30. Shaq understood immediately. He did not need anyone to explain it. He had watched this exact thing happen in Newark, in Orlando, in every working-class city he had passed through over the years. A big chain opens right next to a small place that has been standing for 30 years. Lower prices because they have the volume. A bigger lot because they have the land money. Brighter lights because they have the marketing budget. And the little place next door just sits there and slowly bleeds to death. Beatrice came back out with the steelworker meatball plate. 6 hand-rolled meatballs in a thick, dark red tomato sauce that was still rising steam. A slice of cornbread leaning against the side. A small dish of sliced pickles. The smell reached Shaq before his fork did. It was the smell of Sunday mornings in his mother's small kitchen back in Newark. The smell of food made by actual hands, not by machines. He looked up. Beatrice was standing at the edge of the table out of habit, cloth still in hand. He asked, "What time do you open?" 4:30, she said. "What time did you get here today?" 4. By yourself? Today, yes. Jean comes in afternoons. Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays. He nodded, cut into 1 meatball, put it in his mouth. Sat with it for 3 seconds. It was real. The kind of good that expensive food never manages to be, because expensive food is missing something that only time and human hands can put in. He ate about 1/3 of the plate. Then he set the fork down. He said, without looking up at her, "Do you remember March 14th, 1994? The room went so quiet that the ceiling fan suddenly sounded loud. Beatrice went still. Her hands tightened slightly on the cloth. Then she said, her voice flat and steady, "I remember. I never thanked you. You did not need to." "No," Shaq said. "I did. That is something I needed to do." Neither one of them spoke for long enough that a candle, if there had been one anywhere in that room, would have burned down a few millimeters. Pay close attention here, because this is the real center of the whole story, not what comes after, not what happens on Monday morning. This moment, right here, at a table by a window looking out at a yellow sign, is where Shaquille O'Neal said a 31-year late thank you. And a woman answered by refusing to carry it like a debt. That was when he understood what he was really dealing with. Not someone who needed rescuing. Someone who needed to be seen. Shaq reached into his jacket, not for his wallet. He pulled out the small checkbook he always kept on him. Not because he wrote checks often, but because his stepfather, Sergeant Philip Harrison, had told him that a man should always be ready to put his name on something that matters. He set the checkbook on the table. He said, quiet and direct, "Tell me the number. I will write the check right now." Everything paid off before Monday. No conditions. No contract. Nothing attached. Beatrice looked at the checkbook. Then she looked at him. Then she did something he did not expect. She picked it up, careful, the way you handle something that might break, and placed it back in front of him. She did not push it. She did not throw it. She just set it back down with those rough, burn-scarred hands, gently, the way you settle a sleeping child back into a crib. She said, "Put that away. Get more coffee if you want it. Otherwise, pay for your breakfast and have a good morning. I appreciate you coming in." There was no anger in her voice. No wounded pride flaring up. Just the clean, straight statement of a woman who had decided long before this morning that she would not take money from anyone that way. It was not stubbornness. It was 65 years of knowing the difference between being helped and being bought. Shaq sat still. Don't be a reaction. Be a response. His stepfather's voice landed in his head, so clearly he almost turned around to check if Sergeant Philip Harrison was standing behind him. He looked at the checkbook. He picked it up. He slid it back into his jacket. Slow. Nothing said. He ordered more coffee. Then he finished the rest of the steelworker meatball plate in silence. The man at the other table folded his newspaper at 6:32 in the morning. He pulled on his work cap, shrugged back into his thick blue work jacket, walked to the counter, and set down a few coins and a $1 bill. Beatrice counted it, nodded, and the man walked out, without saying anything else. Shaq watched him go through the window. Then he asked Beatrice, casual as asking about the weather, "Who is that?" "Frank," she said. "Retired steelworker. U.S. Steel shut down in 2011. He was let go along with everyone else." Her voice went a little warmer when she said his name. He comes in every day? 6 days a week. He skips Wednesdays for a doctor's appointment. Shaq nodded slowly. He looked across the street, where Glory Burgers was switching on more outdoor lights even, though the sky was still dark. A young employee in a yellow uniform was pushing a combo breakfast sign out to the edge of the sidewalk. He asked, "How long have you had this place?" 31 years. Since 1993. Same year I went into the league. Beatrice did not add anything. He did not add anything. But something had just been laid down between those two dates. A quiet thread both of them felt, without needing to name it. Shaq stood up, reached for his wallet, left 3 20s on the table, double the price of the meal. He already knew what Beatrice would do. She would ring up the exact amount and keep the rest in the drawer as change, not as a tip. He did not need to wait and see. He had known, from the moment she placed that checkbook back in front of him. He bent through the low doorway, turned his left shoulder inward, and stepped back out. The cold morning air of Gary, Indiana met him on the other side. He got in the car, did not start it right away. He sat with both hands on the steering wheel, looking at the windshield beginning to fog up from the inside. He thought about his mother, Lucille O'Neill, who had worked 3 different jobs in Newark to raise him, and his brother in a small apartment with water stains on the walls, who had never asked a single person for money, not even during the months when the refrigerator was almost bare, who had taught him that self-respect is not something anyone can buy back for you, no matter how good their intentions are. He looked over at Steel City Diner. Then he looked at Glory Burgers. Then he picked up his phone and called Devin Clark. Devin picked up on the second ring. Her voice still had some sleep in it, but she was sharp the moment she heard him. Devin was the director of communications and legal affairs at Shaq Incorporated. She had worked with him for 13 years. She had learned, over time, to tell the difference between a routine call and the kind he made at 6 in the morning from a city that was not on any schedule. He said, "Devin, I need you to pull something together for me. Find out everything you can about a chain called Glory Burgers, where they are based, who runs the Indiana territory, and what exactly they are doing in Gary right now. Whatever you can put together in 24 hours. She asked, "Is something wrong?" He looked through the windshield at the diner. The pale yellow fluorescent light inside was still on. Beatrice was bent back, over the counter again, wiping it down the same as before. He said, "I do not know yet. Find it for me first." He ended the call, started the engine, but he did not head toward Chicago. He drove about 2 miles into a quiet residential street and found somewhere to stay. Pines Motel, $19 a night. The neon sign out front was missing its second O. He paid cash, dropped his bag on a bed with faded blue sheets, pulled out his laptop, and started reading everything available on Glory Burgers Corporation, headquartered in Indianapolis, Indiana. Here is what Devin found over the next 18 hours. Glory Burgers Corporation had been founded in 2009 by a group of private investors. They now operated 83 locations across the Midwest. Their market expansion approach was documented in an internal report Devin pulled through a contact at the Indianapolis Business Council. The strategy had a name inside the company, Neighborhood Anchor. They would identify older, established diners with falling revenue, but enough loyal regulars to prove the location had real potential. Then they would open a new store directly next door, lower prices, bigger signage, constant promotions for the first 3 to 6 months. Just enough to cut off the original place's cash flow and let it die quietly. But that was not the worst of it. Devin called back at 11:23 that night. Her voice was different from before. She said, "You need to hear what I found." The Glory Burgers location in Gary was managed by a regional director named Garrett Lund. Garrett was 38 years old. He had been with the company for 7 years and was recognized as their fastest expansion performer 2 years in a row. The way he kept hitting those numbers was not just about pricing and signage. Devin had found complaint filings with the Indiana State Department of Health and Environment, 2 cases from small diners located near new Glory Burgers openings. Both included witness statements about industrial waste being dumped in the alleys behind the small restaurants at night, and about waves of 1-star reviews hitting Google and Yelp all at once, every one of them describing food poisoning symptoms. Neither case had been fully investigated, Neither one produced any official result. Devin said, I do not have direct proof, yet that they did this to Beatrice's place specifically. But the pattern is identical. Shaq sat in the motel room. The small bedside lamp threw orange-yellow light across a low concrete ceiling. He said, first thing tomorrow morning, contact the state health inspector's office in Indiana. Not local level, state level. Tell them I am requesting an independent inspection at Steel City Diner on Broadway in Gary. I need results before Monday. Devin asked, under what name? He said, a private citizen concerned about food safety in the area. By the book. Correct procedure. I do not want my name used to put pressure on anyone. Understood. One more thing, he said. Pull every traffic report and parking violation record you can find from the alleys behind those two locations you just mentioned. I want to know what industrial trucks were operating back there in the 3 months before each diner closed. Devin was quiet for a moment. Then, you are doing detective work. He did not smile. He said, I am responding, not reacting. He ended the call. He opened his camera roll. He looked at the photo he had taken at 6:41 that morning, right before leaving the diner, while nobody was watching. A simple shot. The steelworker meatball plate from above. Pale yellow fluorescent light across dark red sauce still steaming at the edges. A worn red and white checkered tablecloth. And in the bottom left corner of the frame, Beatrice's hand, placing the plate on the table. Thick, straight fingers. The hands of someone who had worked every single day of their life without complaint. He looked at that photo for a long time. Then he set the phone down on the mattress and lay back staring at the ceiling. He did not sleep that night. But that was not a night that was built for sleeping. Sunday, 4:47 in the afternoon. Rain was coming down. Not hard. The kind of thin, persistent drizzle the Midwest gets in November. Not heavy enough to bother opening an umbrella, but cold enough that you feel it in your clothes afterward. Shaq parked on Broadway, about 50 yards from the diner. He sat in the car and looked through the rain-wet glass. The lights inside Steel City Diner were off. Not off because the hours had ended. Off in that other way. The way lights go off when someone stops finding a reason to keep them burning. He stepped out of the car. He walked in without knocking. The door was unlocked. Beatrice was sitting at the back table, not in her usual place. She had pulled her chair out from behind the counter and set it down in the middle of the dining room, among the empty tables, the chairs all flipped upside down on top of them for end-of-day cleaning. In front of her sat a stack of thick, white ceramic plates, the heavy, old-fashioned kind that factories stopped making years ago. She was wrapping them in newspaper, slow and careful, like every single plate deserved to be handled, with some dignity even, if it was about to go into a cardboard box. She did not look up when he came in. Shaq took in the room, the black and white photographs on the walls. The small television, dark. The metal utensils in the glass cabinet, arranged more neatly than usual. The deliberate neatness of someone who knows the next person to open that door will not be them. He lifted a chair down from the nearest table, set it on the cold concrete floor beside her. Sat down. The chair groaned. He was so large that when he sat in a standard chair his arms had no natural place to go. He ended up resting both hands on his thighs, like a man sitting in a funeral row. They sat without talking for a moment. Then Beatrice said, "I still down, still wrapping plates. Go on home. There is nothing to eat here tonight." He said, "I did not come to eat." She stopped. She set the half-wrapped plate down on the table. She looked at him for the first time since he had walked in. He asked, "Do you still have any meatballs back there?" Beatrice looked at him longer than a question like that should take to answer. Then she stood up. She walked into the kitchen. The refrigerator pulled open. A pan settled onto the stove. A burner clicked. And the smell of butter began to fill the dark room. Warm and familiar. The smell of every dinner in every childhood kitchen Shaq could still remember. 15 minutes later she came back with 2 plates. She set one in front of him, one in front of herself. She pulled over a second chair and sat down across from him, not as owner and customer, but as 2 people who had quietly agreed they were going to eat dinner together tonight. They ate in silence for a while. Then Beatrice began to talk. She talked about 31 years inside these walls. About her husband Leonard, who had stood behind that same stove, with her for 18 years, before his heart gave out one winter in 2011. The same year the steel plant closed down, and Frank was pushed into a retirement he had not chosen and had no plan for. She talked about Jean, 28 years old, a single mother working 3 afternoon shifts a week, so she could afford preschool for her 3.5-year-old. She talked about those winter mornings in 2011, when she had put out free soup for the men who had lost their jobs overnight. Men in their 50s and 60s sitting on plastic chairs out front, not knowing what retirement was supposed to look like, when work had been the only thing they ever were. She did not tell any of it looking for pity. She told it the way a person recounts history, real and done with, and therefore not something you need to cry about. Shaq listened. He did not cut in. He did not nod too many times the way people do when they are performing attention. He just listened. Then she said, Glory Burgers opened September 2nd. That month I was down $1,920. October I was down $2,870. This month, she stopped for a second. The bank sent a notice last Wednesday. He asked, voice low, do you know what they have been doing to your reviews online? She stopped chewing, looked at him. He said, since October 18th, your diner has received 273 new one-star reviews on Google and 186 on Yelp. Every single one describes food poisoning symptoms. I looked at all of them carefully. Most of those accounts were created 7 to 10 days before they posted the reviews. No activity before that date, and every one of them was posted between 2 and 4 in the morning. Beatrice put her fork down. He kept going. On top of that, we found records tied to an industrial waste company called Midwest Clean LLC. They made 4 nighttime trips to the alley behind your diner during October. Midwest Clean LLC has legal ties to a subsidiary of Glory Burgers Corporation. We are still locking down the full connection. The room went quiet enough that the sound of the rain on the roof came through clearly. Beatrice looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, voice level, why are you doing all of this? Shaq set his fork down. He looked straight at her. He said, because in 1994, you did not ask me if I needed help. You just stepped out and helped. Beatrice looked down at her plate. He said, slower this time. And because I have seen enough to know that what is happening to your place is not the natural market at work. This is someone using money to destroy something that no amount of money can ever replace. I will not accept that. A long pause stretched out between them. Beatrice picked up her fork. She cut a piece of meatball, put it in her mouth, chewed slowly. Then she said, what are you planning to do? That was the question he had been waiting for. Not agreement, not refusal. The question of a person who has decided they are willing to keep listening. He said, I have a business offer for you. I want to sign a lease contract for some wall space inside this diner to display and sell a limited line of merchandise from the LSU Basketball Foundation, an education nonprofit I run. 1-year contract. You receive a $12,000 advance on the first day you sign. We split the retail sales revenue every quarter. Everything is written out in a legal contract. You are my business partner, not a charity case. Beatrice sat still. He went on. That advance is enough to clear your bank debt and cover 3 months of operating costs. As for the rest, that is between my team, the Indiana State Health Department, and our attorneys dealing with Glory Burgers. You do not have to do anything at all. Just open your doors Monday morning the same way you always do. A longer silence this time. Beatrice looked at him the way someone reads fine print, when they want to be certain they are reading it right. Then she said, 12,000 is too much for a small section of wall. He said, the LSU fan base is large. I think you are being valued at the right rate. She held his gaze for one more second. Then she said, let me see the contract. Monday morning, 7:12 a.m. Devin had sent him 87 pages of documentation at 5:43 in the morning, enough to submit to the Indiana State Inspector General's office along with a request for emergency review. The office confirmed receipt at 6:55. The emergency injunction was filed at 7:03 by the law firm Harrington and Associates, representing Shaq Inc., citing documented evidence of unfair competition practices and falsified health records. At exactly 7:12, 3 black vehicles pulled up outside Steel City Diner. Devin stepped out in a long gray coat, with a case file under her arm. Two attorneys walked alongside her. Two Indiana State Health inspectors arrived in a separate car. Garrett Lund pulled up at 8:45. He brought a bank representative, a Glory Burgers work crew, aluminum barriers, and a camera to document the seizure. He wore a black leather jacket, his hair combed back clean, and brown dress shoes too polished for a wet Gary morning. He walked toward Beatrice, who was standing on the front step, and spoke to her in the kind of polite, measured tone that people use when they want to deliver something cruel without needing to raise their voice. He said, "Mrs. Holloway, I am sorry we have reached this point, but the bank has legal standing here. And given what your sanitation record looks like right now, I think you understand that this is where things were always headed." Beatrice said nothing. Garrett looked around. He spotted Devin and the attorneys. His brow drew in slightly, but the smile held its shape. He moved toward Devin. Devin said, steady and clear, "Good morning, Mr. Lund. I am Devin Clark, legal director of Shaq Inc. This is an emergency injunction issued by Lake County District Court at 7:32 this morning. It suspends all foreclosure proceedings against this property for 90 days, while an active investigation into unfair competition practices and falsified health documentation is conducted. Additionally, this is a formal notice from the Indiana State Inspector General's office. An independent inspection completed yesterday found 0 food safety violations at Steel City Diner. She placed both document stacks into Garrett's hands. He looked down. He flipped through the first few pages. His expression did not move, but his hands tightened around the papers. Devin continued, "We have also notified the bank of a $12,000 business partner advance from Shaq Inc. deposited to Mrs. Holloway's account at 6:14 this morning, covering all outstanding debt and related fees. The bank confirmed receipt at 7:01. The bank representative pulled out his phone and checked. He nodded. Garrett Lund stood completely still. He looked at Steel City Diner. He looked at Beatrice standing on the front step with her arms crossed. He looked at the state inspectors. He looked back at Devin. He did not say a word. No shouting. No argument. No threats. He just stood there in the light rain of Gary, Indiana, and understood. Then he turned around, said something quietly to his work crew, and they began loading the aluminum barriers back into the truck. Garrett Lund got into a silver-gray Mercedes. The tires rolled slowly across the gravel lot with a steady crunch, and then the car disappeared into the fog on Broadway. Beatrice watched it until it was completely gone. Then she looked across to the far corner of the front porch where Shaq was standing. Gray hoodie, hands in his pockets. He had stayed far enough back that nobody on the street had taken any notice of him. She did not say anything. He did not say anything either. But they looked at each other for 3 seconds, the way two people look at each other when they have understood enough that words would only slow things down. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He opened the photo from Saturday morning, the steelworker meatball plate under yellow diner light. Beatrice's hand in the bottom left corner of the frame. He typed out a caption, 23 words, Steel City Diner, Gary, Indiana. 31 years. Same recipe. I ate here Saturday morning. Best food I have had in this part of the country. Go try it. He posted it to his personal page of 10 million followers at 9:03 Monday morning. By 10:15, the photo had 700,000 likes. By 11:30, 170 people had commented asking for the exact address. By 1 o'clock in the afternoon, Jean arrived for her afternoon shift and stopped in the doorway. A line of people stretched from the front entrance all the way out to the sidewalk. They had umbrellas. They had rain jackets. They were standing in the thin drizzle of Gary, Indiana, without moving. Frank came at 1:47. It was not his day. Monday was not his day, but he came anyway. He stood and looked at that line and said to Beatrice in the voice of a man who does not usually say things like this, "You see. I told you." Beatrice did not smile, but the corners of her eyes creased in the way they do when a person is working hard not to. She said, "Get inside, Frank. Coffee is hot." He went in. The photo kept spreading. By the end of that week, a reporter from the Chicago Tribune called Devin asking about the connection between Shaq Inc. and Steel City Diner. Devin answered in 3 sentences. Shaq Incorporated has a legitimate business partnership with this establishment. All terms were mutually agreed, upon by both parties. We have no further comment. 2 weeks after that, the Tribune published an investigative series on Glory Burgers Corporation's neighborhood anchor strategy, built from documents Devin had passed along through an anonymous channel. The piece laid out in detail the fake review operation and the role of Midwest Clean LLC in damaging competing businesses across Indiana and Illinois. Garrett Lund was officially terminated by Glory Burgers Corporation on December 17. The company's press release listed internal ethics violations as the cause. The corporation agreed to pay Steel City Diner $150,000 in an out-of-court settlement. No admission of guilt. Beatrice accepted the settlement. Then she transferred exactly $12,000 back to Shaq Incorporated down to the last cent. Devin confirmed it and forwarded a message from Shaq. 2 words, "Thank you." Beatrice did not write back. But the next morning, when Frank came in at 6:32 like he always did and set his coins on the counter for a cup of coffee, Beatrice slid the money back toward him and said, "On me today?" Frank looked at her. She said, "Sit down. Coffee is hot." Frank sat down. Steel City Diner opened at 4:30 in the morning. Same as it had every single morning for 31 years. No new sign. No LED strip lighting. No fresh blacktop parking lot. Just the pale yellow fluorescent light coming through the front window and landing on the dark sidewalk outside. And the smell of butter moving in a cast iron pan. And the ceiling fan turning overhead. Slow. Constant. Like the breathing of something that is still alive.